So I want to help you guys out with a couple of tips that I found extremely useful ways of thinking about some things. There's two really big manipulation tactics I find that people use. And I know manipulation is kind of this like really heavy word, but most people aren't doing it in this way to be mean or to be, evil or anything like that. A lot of people are actually just trying to make sure that you don't go into what they think is a wrong way of doing your life based on something in their past or their experience. And what was right for them or what was wrong for them might not be right or wrong for you. So that brings me to sort of the big first one is watch out for people that try to tell you that they know better for your life than you do. It kind of comes in a lot of subtle ways too. There's this tendency to just kind of go with what everybody else is doing, and sometimes that's totally fine. That's exactly what you need. And sometimes it's really not. And so one of the ways that I determine whether or not something is right for me is I kind of take a few deep breaths, really get centered. There's a million ways to do that. There's all kinds of like videos on the internet and articles and books about that. So I won't go necessarily into that. Find the way that you like best for that. Get into that space and ask yourself, what do I want to do with the time that I have? And this gets rid of a lot of the shoulds and get to that quiet space and just listen to that first thing that kind of comes up. Because you want to find what's right for you. And sometimes we have sort of this distorted view of our fears. If there's some sort of like really big feeling around this, that's something to look at. So if you're having a lot of fear or anxiety or anger around a certain decision, there's actually probably a wound that comes from that, and it's worth it to kind of trace it back and say, okay, where does this come from? Because those kind of things, after you've done a lot of inner work, you're like, oh, this is a good way to point towards something that I can work on. You kind of get excited when you see them because you're like, oh, now that I've found it, I can kind of trace it back. And then once you release it, oh man, sometimes I have little bliss moment, it's longer than moments, blissed out sections of time. It can be all kinds of different time frames. Sometimes it's just like this release of this weight that I had. So watch out for people that try to tell you that they know better what you should do with your life. Now, I'm not saying that you don't take any advice. That's crazy. There's all kinds of people that have all kinds of experience that can give you all kinds of information about ways that you can make decisions. But what they should be doing is saying, here's what I found, and here's what the result was. Not, you should do this because this way is wrong. Just because you're getting advice from somebody doesn't mean that you should give away your power to them. This leads into sort of another thing. People will tell you that it's either this or this. It's black or it's white. It's left or it's right. It's this or that. And there's an entire spectrum of all kinds of answers. Even in the section of this versus that, there's still like, what's the definition of this versus that? Because everything, at one level, everything is just one. But that's not really helpful on this, where the rubber meets the road in real life kind of situations. So know that there is just a giant spectrum of all kinds of possibilities, and that it is a little bit different in every single area. So, and it's a different for where your life is going. It's different for where their life is going. So things to watch out for are people that try to tell you that they know better for your life, and people that tell you that you should either do this or that, when there is an entire spectrum of all kinds of answers that you can go to. So that's one of the fun things about coming up against these things where you're like, oh, should I go to college or join the military? Maybe neither. Maybe you start your own business. Or maybe you go to two-year school, or maybe you do both. There's not just one answer, and I want you to think about what answer to these kinds of questions, when you imagine yourself in that situation, how do you feel? Like, do you feel kind of this relief? Do you feel elated? Is that what makes you happy? Because really, like, we're never going to figure out exactly how we're going to live our lives so that we never get, uh, you know, never get hurt or never experience fear. That life doesn't exist. And you know what? I just want to free you from the whole idea that there's some way that if you play all your cards right, that you're gonna be able to live a life where you never encounter fear or disappointment or make mistakes, because it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So why try for it? Go be the unique and beautiful snowflake that you are. Go try things. Go make mistakes. Go live the dream. And go change the dream because that dream didn't work out, and that's okay. I want you to find the way that, like, you enjoy the journey, and then you kind of go to this idea of a generalized destination that you want to get to. I mean, you can get specific, but I find that it's good to be able to course correct towards a generalized idea. But maybe that's not right for you. Maybe you shouldn't listen to me. Maybe you should listen to you. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. I hope it was useful. Now, I very briefly glanced over a couple of things that really deserve, like, books and videos and lots more information about them. And they exist. Like, there's tons of videos and tons of books about such things. Like, I glanced over a little bit of how I do inner work, but if you want a little more information in a wonderful book, I highly recommend this one. How to do the work is about, like, going in and healing inner trauma. So also another thing, this video goes over a couple of manipulation tactics that people use, and generally speaking, there are people that want you to avoid doing things that will lead you into harm's way, generally speaking. But there are manipulation tactics that people use that are less harmless, and so I'm going to do a whole video on that as well. So look for those in the future.